Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time it is in the world where you are tuning in. We do so appreciate you being here with us tonight. This is the first full regular season edition of Backyard Buckets presented by Backyard Sports. Last week was Halloween, so we decided to take the evening off and celebrate the with the kids, right? Because we love kids here respectfully. Ryan, it is wonderful to have you back on the show. Thank you so much. How you doing, brother?
I'm glad to be back. I think it's been a while. I think we just did I was on the preseason show, and we skipped a couple weeks. And you had Sam on here. I thought I was being
Mm-hmm.
replaced, but she's not here, so clearly not committed.
It's true. It's true. Sam's sister asked me. She was like, "Hey, when are you gonna invite me on your show?" And I was like, "I don't know. What do you want to talk about?" She
Yeah.
goes, "WNBA," and I was like, "Well, that season ended. What else can you talk about?" She goes, "Baseball," and I was like, "Well, it's an NBA show, so I don't think we're going to talk about that."
And baseball's also over.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
it's like
two
we
sports that are currently not doing much.
we ran out of topics real quick.
Yeah. So, what do you think about the off season?
Yeah. Juan Soto, where's he going to land?
Yeah, I mean, you could talk for a long time about that. I mean,
You could.
it's like three teams, but you
Well,
could talk
two,
forever about it.
two of them are in New York.
Yeah, and one used to be in New York.
Yep. Juan Soto, come home. Washington misses you.
They could probably afford him.
You could definitely afford him.
They don't have any budget or any people on the books. So.
No. They can pull some of the Washington Wizards budget, use that money to pay for him.
Yeah, the
No,
Wizards, they're not paying anybody.
no, not really. Maybe not after February and the trade deadline passes, but we'll see. With this is an NBA show, we are going to talk about NBA basketball. I promise you all. So thanks for bearing with us there. That being said, Ryan, let's kick this thing off. I'm going to send the two of us to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we're going to talk about a team that I was very, very down on coming into the year. You were higher on them than I was. I don't think you had really considered them to be a contender for a title, but at least a playoff team in the East. They're currently 1-6. They're tied for last place in the East with another team that we probably both were a little bit higher on than we should have been, but I still took Philadelphia to go under their win total. But Milwaukee, Philly, they're both 1-6. I kind of give a little bit of a pass to Philadelphia. They started the year without two of their superstars. And even if they were fully healthy, I said this about a couple teams, specifically Philadelphia and the the New York Knicks, not the Brooklyn Nets, that you need to afford for some chemistry to build, right? You need a little bit of time to congeal your new roster. Same with like a Minnesota. Regardless, Ryan, are you just easy question off the top? Are you shocked by the 1-6 start coming out of Milwaukee?
Yeah, I am. I think they're a lot better than 1-6. I still think they're I think I said they were a top half of the East, like playoff. So top four I believe was what I said. I may have even said top three. I still don't feel bad about saying that. I feel like okay. Their underlying metrics don't look that bad. So I think they're just a little unlucky, probably. But yeah, 1-6 is not a great start, to say the least. They've had a tough schedule though: Cleveland, Memphis, Boston, Brooklyn, Chicago, Philadelphia.
Yep.
Philly not playing well, obviously. Chicago looks okay. Brooklyn's playing better than you expect. So, maybe it's a little bit of a schedule thing there.
Yeah, certainly the back-to-back games against Cleveland, who we're going to talk about later on. We're hoping that Gary will jump in at some point in the show. He's off doing real world things this evening. But yeah, shake your head at that. Cleveland's off to an incredibly hot start. Again, we're going to talk about them a little later. But the back-to-back games, back-to-back losses for Minnesota against that Cleveland team, that's really rough to open up the season. It does get a little better for them tonight. They are playing the Utah Jazz, who have the worst record in the West. They're 1-7. They look to be all in for Cooper Flag. Although Cooper Kupp probably could play on that team and make them better at this point, and he'd fit right in. So Milwaukee, at some point in the near future, I don't know the exact timeline, but they're going to get a little bit of relief. They will get Chris Middleton back, who's going to help out that roster and that lineup. I talked on I believe it was the show that Sam was on, so 2 weeks ago, about kind of the disconnect or the lack of chemistry on the offensive end of the court between Dame and Giannis. How on paper they would seem to be one of the best two-man game players, right? Like a pick and roll or whatever, or your standard two-man game, in and out, backstream, something like that. Right. As you watch this Milwaukee Bucks offense, are you seeing the same thing that I'm seeing with the kind of the hindrance, like the hitch in their getting up when you watch Dame and Giannis play together? Or do you think that I'm incorrect in that?
I don't think it's incorrect. I probably think it looks slightly better than you do. And maybe that's rose-colored glasses because of how I felt about him before the season started. I still don't think it's a perfect melding with those guys. Both of them individually, statistically, are doing really well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I still think there's some disagreement about how that team should be run offensively. But I don't have as much of a concern on that side. I think my concern is definitely on the other side of the ball, which is very funny because of how dominant of a defensive force they were during their peak top 5 defense basically every year, and now look like a bottom half of the league defense, like maybe middle of the league. That is what concerns me. I do agree that like some of the pick and roll doesn't like fit Giannis's skill set all the time. And it's also a little predictable, with Dame and Giannis, but they're so individually talented, they can get away with that sometimes. But I really think it's the perimeter defense, missing Chris Middleton, missing the outlet, and the perimeter defense that's hurting them more than anything. Because if you're going to play drop like they do, you have to chase guys around a little bit on the perimeter, get them uncomfortable, force them downhill into the Brook Lopez and Giannis arms. And I feel like Dame, who has done more than last year. I thought he was really bad at that, which was not shocking. This year he looks a little better, but it's still not good. And I don't think it ever will be. I don't think at his age he's going to suddenly become a super high effort, or as they would say in soccer, high work rate defender. So yeah, I mean, how do you fix that?
Yeah, Gary agrees with you. It does kind of start and stop, at least for like a Giannis-led team on the defensive side of the ball, because aside from LeBron James and maybe like a John Morant, he's one of the most terrifying open court players in the league. We talked about it a lot before you and I were on this show, but we would talk often about this. When Giannis was at the peak of his powers, defensively, the other teams would kind of, to borrow a phrase, build the wall, right? You set the ball. You set like 2 defenders just shy of the free throw line and force him to make a decision whether he's going to barrel through the 2 of them or pull up at the free throw line or make a pass out of that. And without the defensive stops, I think that not having Drew Holiday on this team really, really hinders them defensively. They don't have the guy like you talked about to run around and create ball pressure and force the offensive players into the arms of the waiting defenders in the paint. Without having someone on the perimeter to do that, they fall to, as we see them now, 21st ranked defense in the league, right? And that's just not really a recipe for success when you don't have the half court offense to win these games, which is, that again, Giannis being one of the freakiest guys in the open court, he's not that in the half court, right? And when you pair him with a guy like Dame, and the 2-man game just simply is not playing up to snuff for what you might expect from those, you end up with a 1-6 record like they currently have. Now, follow-on question to this Milwaukee Bucks discussion that we're having. Last year, they fired a coach after coaching 33 games, I think it was, for them. Does Doc finish the year?
I'm not sure Doc or Darvin Ham stays on that. It seems like both of them are getting crazy flack. Darvin Ham's just like, I'm just the assistant, leave me alone. And people are like, yeah, we remember you. You coached that Lakers team. Yeah, they were much better off. I think it I kind of think of like head coaches. There's a class of head coaches that get a lot of what they call in the accounting world goodwill, like their name is worth a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they're actually that good or not is, for debate, obviously, but there are certain guys who get goodwill. Doc Rivers is kind of on the back end of that group. Like, he does get a lot of goodwill with his name and like his history. So I think his leash is pretty long, I would say. But if they are 7th in the East, come the All-Star break, then I could very easily see him be gone, or just not playing well. There's a lot of Giannis trade talk, not from him, but from a lot of other people.
Yeah.
And if that becomes something that you hear more of, then I think it's most owners and GMs are going to say, cut the coach, keep the top 5 guy in the league. Hey, Dad.
Hey.
So, yeah, I mean, I think he has a lot more goodwill than Griffin did.
Yeah.
Obviously, as a first-time head coach, like Doc is, I think, a pretty well-respected guy. So, like I said, the leash is longer, but something's got to give eventually, right? If Chris Middleton comes back and they're still struggling, like, it may accelerate it. It's like, hey, you can't even do it with the full team. Like,
yeah. I tend to lean towards him finishing out the year, and then if they finish, like you talked about, in the play-in tournament, and maybe they don't actually make the playoffs, I could see him choosing to like mutually part ways with the program.
Yeah, that's what they would do with him.
Well,
Griffin gets fired, he gets to mutually part ways. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you said it. He has a lot of goodwill around the NBA, right? There's a lot of guys in the league that really admire what he did in Boston specifically, and then again in LA with the Clippers and Lob City. He's won a lot of games. I don't think he's a great basketball coach, but he's won a lot of games in the NBA. But he had a pretty good life before he took that Milwaukee job, and it's not going great for them now. So I could see him almost like choosing to be like, hey, I don't really feel like coaching this team anymore. And then they're starting from square one all over again. And maybe that trade buzz does come to fruition, and we see a team send the treasure trove up to Milwaukee, and they kind of blow it up and start over. Which after their draft would sort of make sense.
I don't think you feel comfortable giving any coach a chance over there. Like, you got to get a veteran in there. Like, all the new coaches, I'm not sure it's a great job. Like, they're on the downhill age-wise. Like, a lot of their stars are old.
Yep. Middleton too.
Yeah, exactly. How much does Brook Lopez have? How much does Dame have? I mean, Dame's what, 35? 34?
35, 36, something like that.
Yeah. Giannis, I think 29, 30, something like that. Like, who uses his physicality to dominate games. You probably have like a 2-year window if you're lucky. Like, that's if you're very lucky. I think that those guys age gracefully. Giannis is probably still good at 31, 32, but like, he probably starts tailing off, and the rest of the team is terrible at that point. So I don't know, not a good spot to be.
No.
You're kind of in a win now, but like don't have the capability to move a lot of things to win now. It's a weird spot.
Yeah, that this comment, unfortunately, is the way it works in a lot of professional sports. We've seen it in the NFL with quarterbacks and coaches. We see it in the NBA, mostly with star players and head coaches. Like the team owners value the asset of the star player more so than they do the coach. And it is unfortunate. You feel as bad for them as you can. They're making millions of dollars, but anytime you get fired, that's a shitty feeling, you know?
Yeah, heavy's the head that wears the crown, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You get all the blame and very little of the praise as a coach. There's a lot of great coaches that people have no idea who they are. Kenny Atkinson's like a good coach that most people probably don't even know who that is.
Frank Martin,
yeah. There's a lot of great coaches. A lot of great assistant. Yeah, people know him. A lot of great assistant coaches. People don't know who they are, but they take all the blame. They get cut with every administration. It's like kind of like being like the chief of staff. It's like once your boss is gone, you're gone. It's just a rough job. Unless you're like dad as a coach and you can just be his assistant coach forever, that's a sweet deal. But some guys have done that.
Yep. We see that often. There's a defensive coordinator at the University of Washington right now, whose father was a longtime head coach in the NFL. He goes by the name Belichick. You may have heard of him. I'm not entirely sure. He's also a strength and conditioning coach at Arizona, or for the Arizona Cardinals, I guess. His last name is Gruden. You may know him.
Yep.
Some nepotism within the professional sports ranks.
Makes it crazy.
It's true.
Yeah, I think Gary's saying they look like the Bulls a little bit. I don't think they're in as bad of a spot as the Bulls, but I don't think they're far off from being the Bulls. They're an injury off from being the Bulls. Like if Dame gets hurt or Chris can't come back, like they're in Bulls territory. The Bulls never had Giannis.
Exactly.
But they did have, some other guys who were a tier below those guys. The Bulls look better than them right now, so they're figuring it out.
The Bulls are younger and healthier than is Milwaukee at the moment.
And Nikola Vucevic is playing out of his mind,
that helps.
I think he's shooting like 50% from three and like 90 from the line. That'll hold.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no to the mean.
No. Well, there's another team we're going to talk about that is also they are shooting 3-pointers, but not the way that Vooch is.
Right. Yeah.
But we're going to talk about the Warriors now. Warriors tied for the best record in the West. They're 7-1. They're just coming off a win in Boston last night. Now, granted, obviously Porzingis is not playing. Jaylen Brown did not play in that game. But Giannis, Steph Curry had kind of a classic Steph Curry game where he took over late in the fourth quarter and kind of sealed the win for Golden State. I know I asked you this question about Milwaukee, and I know it's still pretty early in the season, but does it shock you at all that we're seeing a 7-1 Golden State team? Because I'll be honest, it surprises me a little bit. They're playing far better than I expected them to start this season.
Yeah, it's shocking. They are not a 7-1 quality team. They have. I know everybody just watched them play Boston, so you're going to laugh when I say this. Their schedule has been very easy. Boston was a big win. I give them all the credit in the world for beating Boston. But they played Washington before that. Houston, they gave up a 31-point lead to go into overtime, and they barely won that game. Should have never given up a 31-point lead. Usually not a good sign for a veteran team. Then they played New Orleans twice, who have not looked great. They lost to the Clippers, who have been okay. They've looked better than I think some people thought they would without Kawhi. Beat Utah, beat Portland. So they played Portland, Utah, Washington are three of their wins. Houston's a middling team. New Orleans is below middling right now. Their only good wins is Boston. Everything else is kind of, you can only beat who you play. But sure. I don't feel great about them. I think defensively they're pretty solid. I don't think offensively they're that good. They look, yeah, tough schedule. I think offensively they have issues. Like the ball movement is still there, the classic Steve Curry ball movement and cutting that you see, but they don't have the guys to fully accomplish the goal there, right? It's like a bunch of guys who do one thing that they need them to do well, and they're throwing 14 people. Buddy Hield looks great, yeah. But
Klay Thompson light.
Yeah, he can't keep doing that though. Like as good as he has been in his career, he's shooting a little over his head right now. I just don't feel confident that their offense can hold up. But they're scrappy, and I think their coach is decent. But yeah, Buddy Hield's shooting 50% from three, so he will likely not continue. That would be my guess. On how many attempts per game he's taking, something crazy. Nine attempts per game. He will not continue that.
Probably not. Yeah, but if you put him and Vooch on a team together, whew, now they'd be killing it.
Yeah, that's true.
So Golden State, I tend to agree with you. Also, there is a slight sense of nepotism on the Los Angeles Lakers right now.
I haven't heard about this.
Highest scoring father-son duo in NBA history, though. So
that's true. That's true.
There is that.
If you count both of Rick Barry's kids, do they beat him? I haven't looked this up, but if you count, because they both played a long time. I know we're not talking about that, but
that's a good question though. I'm not entirely sure.
Because if you only include one kid, yeah, they're crushing him. But if he gets to add both his kids,
yeah, I don't know. The Waltons build and play long enough.
Luke, yeah, that's probably not
career highs with each everybody. Yeah, see up to like true. 5 points of the year now.
He actually doesn't look that bad, honestly. Like he's defending well, like which is what his skill set is, and he's taking open threes. Like that's all they want him to do. He shouldn't be playing, he should be in the G League, which I think he is now. But he's doing, I think he knows his skill set, and I think that's the first ability to be successful in the NBA as a non-star.
Yeah, that's something you kind of had to imagine he was going to have coming in, the son of a basketball savant, right? One of the most cerebral players we've ever seen play the game.
Yeah.
You certainly didn't think he was going to come in with delusional expectations.
Yeah, that's true.
Regardless of Bronny, back to Golden State. I know it's super early, and we're going to talk a lot more around the trade deadline. Given their 7-1 start, you have to imagine this is a team that feels as though they can make a playoff run, right? I know that Steph Curry's 36. I believe Draymond's like 35, 34. Is this a team poised to be buyers at the trade deadline? And if so, you can give me names if you'd like, but what sort of player do you think they would be looking to add to that roster to make them contenders in the West?
That's a good question. I think they probably would be buyers just because they have a 14-man rotation, and they could probably get away with shortening that by like 3 guys and still have a really long rotation. Yep. There's guys like Lindy Waters the third that probably should get I think he's played in every game this season, but could probably get more minutes. Like they'd be okay like losing somebody else for that. Brook Lopez. I mean, Brook Lopez is not a terrible option if Milwaukee. I don't think Milwaukee will get off that unless they go Giannis at the 5 and just like that's going to be their team.
Dell, Steph, and Seth, high scoring father son trio.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one too. I think it's tough to find a like really great fit for Golden State unless they're working in like the middle of the NBA, right? If they're getting like a high-end role player, I could see that being effective. I think it's hard to get stars to play that style. Mm-hmm. because that's just not how a lot of stars play, right?
Right.
I think playing with Steph is like helps a lot of people, but I don't know what star becomes available. But I can see them looking for like a wing or a big, like a passing big, just if they don't feel like Looney has anything left in the tank, which I think there's some questions about Kevon Looney and how much he can play. Trace Jackson Davis is getting a lot of his minutes. So yeah, a big or a wing. I just I don't know. I don't know if they want to transition out of their their half and half. We're trying to develop guys plus still compete, because if you have to trade Kuminga or something to get like a star, because you would probably have to, or you're trading Podziemski, something like that to get a star. It's like, does that go away from what you've been trying to do to just like we're doing with the economy, a soft landing after the Steph years, right? That's been the whole concept. It's like, hey, once these guys are gone, we'll like be okay, because this team will be like competitive. So if they decide to get rid of that, then they have the assets to trade for somebody. I don't know what the cap looks like, but they have the assets.
So I have a name for you, and this is not something for those of y'all that are new. This might be your first time listening. We are a podcast that I promise we know what we're talking about when it comes to basketball, but we don't do a lot of show prep with each other. So we put each other on the spot a whole lot here, and that's what makes it fun. But I have a name for you. It's a guy in the Eastern Conference for a team that we've seen be extremely successful in recent years, but they may be on the tail end of that successful stretch. Does a Jimmy Butler do anything for you if they were able to move him out of Miami and into that Golden State locker room?
Jimmy Butler. I mean, Jimmy Butler's interesting. He's old, and just like not getting any younger as everybody else is. I could see that. I could see them trading like a 3-for-1 and like a pick or something and getting him. I think that would make some sense. Like I said, they have a pretty long rotation, and I think Miami would love Pods or Kuminga. Like those seem like guys they would actually really like.
Yeah.
It also seems like the Warriors and the Heat kind of have similar philosophies about how they play, not offensively, but just like philosophically, like we're going to play a certain way every night, like with energy and stuff, right? Like they both have pretty good reputations for that. So I could see those, Miami, if they're like, we're not competitive, we're going to build around Bam and just put like a team around him. I could see that. And I could see the Warriors wanting to do that.
Yeah.
Probably.
I think they really like Pods.
No, they do. Yeah,
I think they love him next to Curry. He's the off-ball playmaker that can play on the ball when Steph needs like a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
I think they keep Pods if they can.
They'd rather move like Moody, probably. Yeah. Moody and like Wiggins plus a pick plus
probably Kuminga.
Yeah, I mean, you try not to probably. You probably try to like give them just something else, but yeah, I mean, it probably has to be something like that. Well, he talks and then appears.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, so my take on Pods is like it feels like he's been the guy that's been kind of bumped from the rotation more often than some of the other young guys. And I know like Steve Kerr just has this reputation. It's what he does with young guys, but it feels like Pods has been the guy that's been very erratic when it comes to playing time and how he fits in the rotation. I don't disagree with you that I like him as the archetype off-ball guy next to a guy like Curry, but I don't know that the Warriors truly are bought into that. I could be wrong, but I just know like as a Pods fantasy owner, I've seen his minutes be like 9 one night and 30 the next, and it's just very weird. And he goes in and out of the starting lineup. There's just no consistency there. It might just be the fact that the Warriors don't know how to develop young guys in this new era. They've done it with a lot of guys. They like Looney's kind of regressed. Kuminga, it feels like he's ready to break out, but they just don't seem to really be invested in him. Moody was another guy that like is he on the brink of being something or not? And then they kind of bust his minutes down. We saw it with Wiseman as well. Like I just don't know that the Warriors are really invested in developing these young guys the way that like they need minutes, right? So that I don't know. Sometimes I just feel like Pods feels like he's kind of the odd man out in the grand scheme of things. I could be wrong though.
Yeah, Pods. He's played in 7 games. He's only started 3, but he is playing 28 minutes a game. Not to shit on your theory, but he's playing the most minutes of anybody in the team.
Yeah.
But again, only 7 games. It's a small sample size. There's a chance that we see him get bumped. I have a hard time believing that he's going to be the one that gets bumped, though, because if you remember the playoffs last year, he was playing, or not, was it last year? Yeah, it was last year. He was playing like real playoff minutes for them and closing games with Curry on the floor. Like, I don't know anything, but I feel like Pods is the one that they hang on to and they feel better moving on, especially like Ryan said from Wiggins, because you're going to have to make a contract move. And then probably Kuminga and Moody like that. If I see them making a move, that would be the move I project them to make, sending the 3-for-1 and like a pick out the door to bring in somebody like a Jimmy Butler. It doesn't have to be that. That was just the name that made the most sense to me from both sides of the deal. An aging guy. But
I think to be fair to fantasy owners, no one on Golden State's great to play except for Steph right now because they've played 12 guys, 6 games.
Yep.
If you include Steph, which he's played 5 games, but he's going to play every game, right, that he's able to. And then they have played another 2 guys, 4 games. Yeah. So that's 14 guys have played half of their games.
Yep.
28 minutes is incredible for a 14-man rotation. You're a stud at 28 minutes.
Yeah.
Everyone else everyone's at 15 to 20. It's like the whole team is playing 15 to 20 minutes or 15, 25 minutes. But I agree. I think if I'm Golden State, Pods makes a lot of sense to keep if you're trying to push right now. But again, if you're trying to do the soft landing, you don't want to lose Kuminga because that's the guy that has the ceiling, right?
Yeah.
Pods, it's like maybe he's a 2 or a 3, like best case scenario, but I don't think he is. He looks like another guy they have on their team. He reminds me of like Kyle Anderson a lot, just like slightly better. But it just, what's the philosophy, right? Is it we can win the West, which I think is crazy to think. I don't think Jimmy Butler gets you there. Or is it, hey, let's like just keep what we have, hope we win a series or 2, sneak up on somebody, get nuclear from 3, which they can very easily do, and win a series very quickly. And then transition, get those guys experience in the playoffs, Pods and Kuminga. And then when Steph is 40 and just a set shooter, they're there for him as like stars, right? Or they develop into legitimate guys, and then you can trade them for a younger star later, right? That becomes disgruntled because they inevitably do. If Devin Booker becomes available, if Phoenix like blows up somehow, that they look great right now. But I'm just throwing that out there as an option. I don't like the trade unless they legitimately think they can win the West, which is very bold. Because they might be like the 7th best team in the West right now, and would they be 5th best with Jimmy Butler, depending on who they lose? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you're not buying to chase the 4 seed, right? Like,
yeah, and I get it. Steph's ancient, but and you're like, we gotta commit to him before he's done. But I think if they're 7-1 the rest of the year, you know what I mean, they're probably buying, but I don't feel like they will be with how they look. So
how many more times do they play Portland?
Not enough.
Yeah. Washington, the Jazz.
It is still early. We're 8 games in. It was a thought-provoking question as to, given the current rate of how we see them playing, do they look to be buyers? And what kind of person do you add to that roster to give you? Because you still, again, he is ancient, but you have Steph Curry. Your window is now. You have to make every move possible. It's having an aging superstar in the NBA is the same as having a star quarterback in the NFL on a rookie contract. It's
Yeah.
what Washington is going through right now. It's what New England is going through right now. It's what maybe Chicago is going through right now. It's what Houston, your Texans are doing. You have a star quarterback on a rookie deal. You have to make every decision possible for the organization to put players around him to win before he takes that cap hit.
Yep.
It's the exact same thing in the NBA.
4-year window.
Yep. It's the exact same thing in the NBA. You have Steph at 36. Every single decision you make, unless you're going the soft landing route like Ryan has been talking about, every decision should be to win now before he falls off the cliff.
Ryan, as the resident historian, how many soft landing situations have we really ever seen in the NBA, right? I know every team would love to just transition from one superstar to the next. Not everybody's the Green Bay Packers. How many
I have one
NBA
example.
Okay. How many NBA dynasties have we seen transition from one dynastic set to another? And the only one I can think of, I'm going to back off. I asked the question. I'm not going to spoil the answer.
Yeah, I don't think there's a ton, right? Like, it's a superstar league. There's been like some serendipitous times where that has happened with the Spurs are probably like a good example of that, right? It's like, we're good. Then we get Tim Duncan. We're great. And then we get Kawhi. He becomes great, right? Like through that, then Manu becomes a Hall of Famer. Tony Parker, guys who you got later in the draft become these great players, right? But that was not really a soft landing. That was just like continued. They never actually soft landed. They just kind of held on for forever. Unfortunately for the Rockets. But yeah, it's pretty rare. It doesn't happen too often. I think it's a crapshoot to do it. I have said 1,000 times on this podcast, I like people to commit to something. And I do think the soft landing is a lack of commitment.
Yep.
But if that's the vision, go for it, right? Like, I don't think it's impossible. Just because it hasn't happened successfully all the time doesn't mean it can't. There's just not a lot. Like, I can't think of very many off the top of my head.
The one that I was thinking of was Boston with the big three in 2009. After they kind of lucked into that, right? It wasn't necessarily obviously Danny Ainge knew exactly what he was doing. He was selling all of those guys to Brooklyn for their picks back. But that's the only one that I can really think of having like a true soft landing. And they were really good after that. They weren't even like middling. It's like, oh yeah, we won a title. Everybody got hurt, so we couldn't back to back. So we trade them all, and then we fucking are just good right away again. Like,
yeah, you could argue that's almost what I'm saying, though, is they just committed to the inverse twice, right? They were like, we're really good, not good anymore. We commit the other direction, and then they got lucky in the other direction because not everyone does. There was never really a soft landing. It was just like, good, all right, they're injured, blow it up. And then it just so happened they got two great players out of it.
They fleeced Brooklyn with all the picks, and Philly gave them all the great players right after their pick.
Yeah, and that's my point. Like, that's my argument of that. I think is actually a better move, right? It doesn't always work. Like, you can blow it up, and every single draft pick you get is not great. Like, it doesn't turn out how you want. But obviously, getting Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown out of it turned out all right. 2 top 25 guys in the league. It is hard to play the middle ground. The only time I think anybody should play the middle ground, and I don't agree with this, is when an owner is annoying about it. And I know there's lots of them. They're like, I refuse to let no one show up. The seats need to be filled. We got to like ride out this guy till he dies because that's what's like filling the seats. And it's like, we'll be the 8th seed every year or the play-in now, right? Every year and be fine. And I feel like the Warriors are almost in that ballpark now.
Yeah. Seems like you're talking about a specific owner who just built a $2 billion stadium and called it the Intuit Dome and allows smoking indoors.
No, I would not agree with that. I think he's a much more committed guy. Actually, the Rockets were like that for years. I've told you this. They were just like the 9. They would miss the playoffs or they'd be the 8th seed every year, and it was like Luis Scola was like their second best player, and it was like they could beat you on a like a good night, but they were not winning. Like, they should have blown it up 5 years before that. They just happened to get lucky that James Harden became available. He turned to be a superstar, but that was luck, like good scouting, but also luck in what they paid for him, right? but again, how many of those times exist, like in team building history, especially in the modern free agency period? Like it just doesn't happen. It's like build through the draft or accumulate superstars. That seems to be the only way to be successful. So I would love the Warriors to commit. I just don't think they will because of they've been talking about that soft landing for so long.
Yeah. Well, let's answer Gary's dad's question. Is Curry going to play the full season? I think my personal opinion, and then I'll get y'all's. My personal opinion is that if they continue to win at this pace or even like slightly lower, they're going to play as much as they can. Again, same analogy of having the star rookie quarterback on that early deal. You make every decision you can to win with him in that exact moment. So if they are still winning at a high level come Christmas, he's going to play a bunch of games, as many as he possibly can. Gary, what do you think? Kind of feel the same?
I agree. My biggest concern is the fact that I don't know if he can hold up playing that many minutes, and I think that's going to be the potential issue for them. He's a player whose style puts him in harm's way a lot, and not in the way that like your tradition, like a Ja Morant, right? If he's kind of the polar opposite of Ja Morant, but they're both players that put themselves in harm's way because he's always running off the ball, and we know how people counter that, and we know how people counter when he's trying to dribble and try to get to the rim. They're going to be physical with him, and he just doesn't hold up because he is a slight guy, and he has to stay that way because of the way he plays and the way he runs around, and you see him get knocked into the front row, off the ball quite a bit. I just don't know that he can hold up just with his style of play, and I don't see him changing it until, as Ryan said, like when he's 40 and he's Ray Allen and he's just a set shooter in the corner. Until then, what makes him great is his ability to create space in ways that nobody else does and to be able to get that shot off in the manner in which he does it. But it's also the reason he puts himself in harm's way so much. So I think they will, as Bentley said, try to play him as much as possible as long as they're still winning at a pretty good clip Christmas, New Year's, as we get into the heart of the schedule. I just don't know that he can hold up.
Brian, what do you got?
I'm getting to the end of my liking talking about the Warriors. These are my mortal enemies and have been for a long time. But yeah, I mean, if you get 32 minutes out of him every night, like that's quite a lot of rest probably for him, right? But I think you feel all right. They're running 12-man rotations. They can probably get away with that. I think they have the infrastructure to rest him. Maybe not every game, but like just, hey, we don't need to play you 30 minutes every night. You can have a 25 here. And when we really need you, you can have a 36, 37, right? And it kind of evens out to 30. I could definitely see that. They're pretty packed at the guard position, so they can play a lot of guards, I think. And yeah, I think you need to. I think what Gary said is actually interesting about him exposing himself to injury because of the way he plays. I think it's an endurance thing too, right? Like the amount of running he does in the game, in the half court setting, it just blows my mind because I'm tired watching him. It's just like one of the great, just like runs constantly off ball screens, right? And I think as you get older, that obviously becomes more difficult to do for 40 minutes or 35 minutes. So yeah, I think you want to probably rest him a little bit, and not just for injury reasons, just because as a shooter, he's going to lose his legs, and you don't want that. You just put Buddy Hield can play for a little bit.
As long as he's shooting 50%.
Yeah.
That is a good point. The endurance thing. There's you can Google them. There's tons of stories about guys coming into the league, having to guard Curry for the first time, or going to work out with him in the offseason. They're like, oh my God, he runs so much. He doesn't stop moving on the court, and it's almost always at a running pace, right? Like there's very, very few times where you see him kind of standing still. And that's what makes him great. That's why he's the best to ever do it, shooting the ball, right? Because he just gets himself in position to make those shots. One final point before we move off of Ryan's mortal enemies. I was still correct. I am still correct about Trayce Jackson-Davis being a good draft pick. That man's a good NBA player, and you cannot convince me otherwise. He's a good NBA player. I was right in our draft show last summer.
Yeah, I love the guy. I had him at like 30 on my board. I think I had him as a first rounder. He just didn't want. He just did not want to be drafted in the first round because he wanted to go play for a contender. He chose. He did the Austin Reeves, which was a slightly different because it was undrafted. But the classic like, don't pick me unless you're going to take me in the first round. Once he fell out of the first round, he got to pick where he wanted to go. Which is the benefit of being one of the few 4-year guys in every draft, because there's only a handful every year. Yeah, he's great. Like the guy.
Well, we have pontificated enough about Ryan's mortal enemies. I will appease the man by shifting to his one true love, the Houston Rockets. I just have one simple question, and both of you can answer this for me. How many fucking guys are they going to play this year? Because they have about 12 of them on that roster. Ryan, I will let you answer first. Gary and I will cede the floor to you. Please tell us what the ideal lineup is. How many guys are going to play? What does this team look like after the trade deadline? Please just tell us about the Rockets.
Yeah, all good questions. I don't think anyone knows the answer to them. I'll give you kind of my very basic opinion because I think it's a very complex issue. First of all, I want to say from a team building perspective, this is the problem you have when you get this many draft picks. Oklahoma City's dealing with this, right? It's like, hey, we got 9 more first round picks. We don't have a rotation spot for literally any of them. Like they have a guy they drafted in the first round this year. They're not going to probably play all year, and he's probably ready to play. Like he was I believe a junior coming out, so he's probably ready. I think the team, Jalen Green got the extension. He's either going to get traded at the trade deadline because of the way his contract works, which I don't think will happen because I don't know if y'all know this, but with the CBA, rookie extensions are kind of a poison pill contract the year before they go up. So they count as only trading away the current value for the team that trades them away and counts as receiving the full amount to the other team. So they actually are really hard to match contracts when it's like, hey, he makes $10 million. When I trade him, he's 30 to you, but only 10 to me. So I got to receive back 20, which causes a lot of issues, right? It makes it almost impossible to trade these guys. So he's probably on the team. I wouldn't expect him to be traded, but some people have said he might. Şengün got the just under the max extension, 4 years plus a player option. He's likely not going anywhere. I don't think you pay the guy and then don't play him. I think Fred VanVleet is gone probably next year, more than likely, unless he signs his player option, but at max is 2 years. Jabari Smith's not going anywhere. Dylan Brooks not going anywhere. Tari Eason looks legit, probably not going anywhere. Amen Thompson not going anywhere. Okay, that's it. That's my for sure. That's what I feel good about. Everything else, I don't know. Reed Shepherd, obviously, just because of rookie contract, he's going to be there. But Cam Whitmore, is that a guy? He's not playing. Like, he's played in 7 games, but he's playing 10 minutes a game.
Yep.
The guy does not pass the ball.
Well,
and if he's not scoring, he doesn't do anything else really because he doesn't defend at a high level.
Right.
So if he doesn't develop any other skills, he's probably gone, or he becomes a trade piece, right? Where a younger team can maybe play him. Maybe Brooklyn wants him or something like that, like in a weird situation, or Washington, right? Like for a vet that Washington has, I could see that. Steven Adams stays on the team. Jock Landale probably would get traded or is not on the team anymore. And that's it. Like that's the whole rotation. It's packed. I mean, that's like 8 guys that aren't going anywhere. And then another 2 that are on a contract, probably not going anywhere. And then like 2 or 3 guys that want to play, but aren't going to play. I don't know. How do you not play, Amen Thompson? How do you not play Tari Eason? I don't know what you do.
It's very interesting that you think Jalen Green may get traded after being, was he a 3rd overall pick, 2nd overall pick?
2nd overall pick, yeah.
I just think that's interesting. Gary, what very open-ended question. What do you think about the Rockets?
I think if their win percentage stays where it's at, they're 5-3 right now. They're first in their division. I know divisions don't matter anymore, but it's just an interesting tidbit. But if they stay by the trade deadline, say they're 10 games over 500, maybe 12 games over 500. I think they're buyers, and I don't put it past them to potentially have Jalen Green in a package for a vet that's got a big contract where, as Ryan astutely pointed out, this year is a strange year for them to trade him because of the way the NBA's trade structure. It's stranger than any other league. You have to match money. You have to match a lot of things. You've got percentage. You can move up and down. You can only trade certain players, like certain players. It's crazy. It's wild. I don't envy the job of an NBA GM at the trade deadline for having to manage that stuff. There's guys that are very savvy about it. But I think it could be a situation where I don't know who's going to be available, but they could be buyers because, as Ryan said, they're very deep. And we've been every year we've talked about OKC being buyers at the deadline, right? Of the last, I shouldn't say every year, but the last couple of years, especially last year and probably again this year, we're going to talk about it. Like, you've got 12 guys, you only need 9. Like, give up a couple and go get a guy who's going to put you over the top. Somebody you can put next to Shea, right? Well, somebody you can put next to Al, and somebody you can pair with if you keep Jalen Green, or is Amin Thompson going to be the guy you're going to build around? Whoever it is that you decide you're going to build around as that centerpiece, put somebody next to him. I do think potentially at the trade deadline, this roster could get a bit of a shakeup. If I'm going to caveat it with the fact that they're 8 to 12 games over 500, right? If they continue to play at the level they're playing at right now, because at that point you're looking at Houston could be hosting a home series in the first round, potentially putting themselves in position to host 2, right? If they can find their way into the top 1 or 2 in the West. Bit of a stretch, I know, but if you're a buyer at the deadline, that's got to be your aim point, right? We just talked about it with Golden State. You're not buying to be the 4 seed. You're not buying to chase, the top half of the West. You're buying to chase the top 1 or 2 seed and a potential trip to the Western Conference Finals, if not the NBA Finals. Do I think that's realistic? Probably not. But I do think that this roster, the way it's constructed, that should be a consideration if they're 10 games over 500 at the deadline. If they're not, then you've got to figure out who's moving in the offseason. That's really what it ends up being. And this roster stays what it is into the end of the season, and then you figure it out in the offseason. Is it Van Vliet, who you're going to try to talk out of a player option, that sort of thing? So I think this roster changes if they continue to play at the level they're playing.
Certainly. Buyers at the deadline if they're 9 and up, games over 500. Yeah, I
love the 8 that Ryan said are those guys, though, right?
Yeah.
I love that 8 that he said. Looking at the roster, like that feels like the 8 that they've got in mind for being the not going anywhere guys.
Yeah, I agree, except the Jalen Green thing. I think that Jalen Green ends up staying long-term in Houston unless there is a superstar on the board that is made available in trade season. Then I think he could be moved. Other than that, I think that we've seen it time and time again. Organizations that draft players very high tend to stick with those guys.
Pedigree.
It happens all the time.
Yep.
So for that reason, I think Jalen Green sticks around. Again, unless there's a superstar of it.
Like, look, if Milwaukee's still fucking terrible at the deadline, and the weird smoke that I think is getting leaked out of Giannis's camp, I know he's not publicly said it, but I think it's coming from somebody close to him. Maybe he's a guy you go get and pair him with. Maybe you move Jalen Green and 1 or 2 of the other young guys, even if it's like a Reed Shepherd that you just drafted this year, like whatever value it is, to put a guy like Giannis next to Al, who's one of the best passers in the league, and Giannis immediately changes your trajectory. But I mean, that's a pie in the sky thought, because Milwaukee might figure it out between now and then.
Certainly.
Yeah, I agree with you on the Jalen Green comment. I think that contract is kind of designed to be traded. If you look at it, it doesn't make a lot of sense for the Rockets. It's like if he becomes a superstar somehow, right, which some guys develop a little later, like he's still 20, I think he's 22. He's still very young. He's like a 4th-year senior right now in college. If it develops, that contract's pretty short. It's 3 years. Yeah. He's gonna say no to the option, and then you got to pay him a max, right? Which is not great. That means you get 1 year, you overpaid him. Maybe he develops the next year. It's an even payment. Maybe you get one underpaid year, right? Where he's a superstar and you're only paying him 30 million or whatever, 32 million or whatever it is. So it looks like it's to be traded. Like because the other option is he doesn't become good and you pay him $33 million a year and he's not good. And then he takes his player option and then you pay him another 33 million and it kills your roster, right? So it doesn't look great for Houston either way from a contract perspective. So I think it's kind of designed to trade him next year or past that point. That's my thought. That doesn't mean it will happen. He obviously could still be on the team. Something has to come up, like you said, but you got to have those contracts to trade to get to people. So that would not shock me either. I just think for this year, he's not going anywhere just with the way the CBA is.
Yeah. And look, he's shooting 38% from three right now on 9.5 attempts a game. Like that's nothing to shake a stick at, right? Like that's good.
But a lot of pull-ups too. A lot of pull-ups. He's not taking them catch and shoot. He's coming off the pick and roll and pulling up, and much tougher shot.
It is certainly, but those are numbers you can look at as a front office and talk yourself into a guy saying, "Hey, he's still super young. He can get better," especially with Reed Shepherd and Albie.
Yeah, since all the other starters are shooting 30% and below.
Well, yeah. Y'all chose to give Dillon Brooks that contract. Nobody forced you into it.
That's true. He's shooting 34%, to be fair, which is actually pretty good for him.
Yeah.
Great defense. Love that guy.
Yeah.
Gritty.
Well, gritty, yeah. Not really a gym rat. Definitely not a coach's kid.
Not a gym rat.
Not sneakily athletic. I don't.
He was killing Wemby in the they played Spurs. They played him 3 times already. And he just like annoys Wemby like all game, just gets underneath him because Wemby still is very skinny, right? And he's just like, oh, you want to post up? I'm just going to push you to the nail every single time. And then you got to take a contested shot. Really, there's no such thing as Wemby getting a contested shot, to be fair. Like all of his shots are kind of uncontested in a way because he shoots so high up. But, get in his face every time. And he's shooting like 20% from 3. So I think it's a good strategy until he gets bigger.
I just used to believe that Dillon Brooks annoys Wemby because Dillon Brooks is Canadian and Wemby is French. And there's that whole French-Canadian like beef going on.
Yeah. The people from Quebec
from Montreal.
Yeah.
All right, let's move to a team that I know in the Freeze household is very near and dear to their heart. We're going to talk about the Eastern Conference. Where did my standings go? There they are. Eastern Conference leading Cleveland Cavaliers 9-0, the only perfect team left in the NBA. My AI co-pilot just turned on. Please turn off. Don't listen to me, FBI guy. The only undefeated team left in the NBA this year. They are 9-0. They look incredible. Evan Mobley. I believe all 3 of us on this podcast said that if Evan Mobley takes the next step, they're going to go well over their win total this season. It does appear that he is making that leap. This is a team that is set to make a deep playoff run, especially in that Eastern Conference, where honestly the only team they might have to compete with is Boston, maybe the Knicks if they continue to congeal and build that team chemistry and Mitchell Robinson comes back and they look really good. But Gary, I'm going to go to you first. How much of this has to do, and you can kind of go wherever you want with this, but I'm going to ask you a direct question right off the rip. How much of this has to do with Darius Garland coming back from that injury that he broke his jaw last year and then kind of finished the season on a down slope? He's had the full offseason to recover, and he looks really, really good. How much of it has to do with Darius Garland, being back to like his normal self, and then offense clicking on all cylinders with him at the helm?
Yeah, listen, they got healthy, and we talked about it in our lead up to the season. It was all about health with this team. Darius Garland looks great. He looks like the guy that we would have thought he would have been last year without the injury. It's an unfortunate injury. It's a devastating one too, because you get the mask and then everything that goes with it. It's your face, and it's tough in the game of basketball, especially because everything is very visual in the game of basketball. And I can imagine coming back from a broken jaw is tough, but he looks great. Got this offense clicking. You mentioned Evan Mobley. It feels like he is finally making good on the hype of what he was coming out of college, being a big man who can do a lot of things. He's very athletic. Donovan Mitchell averaging 24 points a game. They've got 3 guys averaging 17 or more, and they are just, the offense looks phenomenal. And they're disruptive on the defensive end as well. We know Donovan Mitchell, what he is as a two-way guy, but you've got Evan Mobley averaging essentially 2 blocks a game. Jared Allen averaging a block and a half a game, really enforcing in the paint. Jared Allen shooting 70% from the field. Like, it's all working for them, and it's like, this isn't a phantom 9-0 team that might go 82-0 right now. Just kidding, but this isn't a phantom 9-0 start, because they finally seem like they've put it all together, and it really was about health with this team. As we said, Darius Garland looks fully recovered. Evan Mobley looks like he's moving like nothing's bothering him. He's been a guy who's been nicked up a lot throughout his first couple years in the league. Like, this is a dangerous fucking team, and this might be the best team in the East. Even if Boston's healthy, this might be the best team in the East. Just with the way everything is clicking, I don't know. I feel like that a 7-game series between Boston and Cleveland, all things equal in terms of health and everybody's there, I might have to go with like the home team in game 7. That's how close I think it is between these two teams with the way Cleveland looks right now. And we know what Boston is, right? When they're healthy, they're the NBA champions. I get it. But we know, we know what they are right now, what Cleveland looks like. I would honestly think that, like, projecting ahead in May, I might have to go like home team in 7 if it comes down to Cleveland and Boston, the Eastern Conference Championship.
Sure. I'd love to hear that. Darius Garland has a special place in my heart. Man, Gary, you potted with me last night. My words are not flowing well this week. I don't know what's going on. Darius Garland, special place in my heart, undersized guards. I absolutely love to see him thrive in the NBA. That dude is electric. He's one of my favorite players. Ryan, same question to you. How much of this do you pin on the comeback from Darius Garland being healthy this year? And then I'll cede the floor to you. You can go kind of any direction you would want when you talk about this Cleveland team. I'm not going to ask you to make an Eastern Conference Finals prediction like Gary just gave us, but feel free to do so if that's if that's what you want to do, then feel free by all means.
Well, I think in our preseason show, I said I thought they were a 2 or 3 seed, I believe is what I said, which I still feel that way. I don't know why they would get worse with better health, and we're already the 4 seed last year. I don't understand I didn't understand the line Vegas gave either. I found that kind of weird. I think Darius Garland coming back is obviously big. They constructed the team the Trailblazers always wanted to have with Dame and CJ, where it was like, hey, little guards who don't really play a ton of defense. And then it's like, we're going to put these massive guys behind them, right? We're going to put Jared Allen, who's a great rim protector, finishes everything around the basket, right? And Evan Mobley, kind of, Anthony Davis light in a lot of ways. I was happy to see it. This is a team I've always liked since they kind of assembled this group, but I just think they've struggled to play together consistently. There's a lot of individual talent. There's a lot of shooting now. My guy, Gorgeous Niang, is over there.
The minivan.
Peak male athleticism. A guy like Sam Merrill, who was great last year. Sam Merrill was really good. A guy that a lot of people probably don't even know who he is, but very sneaky.
Ty Jerome, another sneaky guy.
Ty Jerome, who's always been a good rotation player, just as a backup one, always has been solid. He's looked good every Cleveland game I've watched. He has been running the offense effectively and making an impact. I mean, this team is relatively deep. They're relatively deep on the wing. Okoro's good off the bench. It is a very solid team with size. I think they can beat you offensively or defensively, depending on the night. I just really like this team. I think Mitchell can obviously beat you by himself, and Darius Garland is a great player. Just needs to stay healthy. I really like this team. I liked him in the preseason. I will continue to like him. Coaching's been great. I said Kenny Atkinson, a guy people don't think about, but he's obviously kind of, I think, unlocked some of that. Mobley, obviously, if he can continue to shoot close to 38% from 3, that will be a big thing, even if it's 34, like even if it's just a threat, right? Like guys have to think about it. Third quarter is not good, but like at least guys have to think about it. And I think that opens up so much for him. And I was a big Evan Mobley fan in the draft. So this is all just guys I've liked being assembled. Jared Allen, the Texas guy, you know, I just, it's all, I think Cleveland might be my Eastern Conference team. You know, 'cause I pick one every year. Usually it's the Wizards just because, you know, I can watch all the games, but I have League Pass, so I don't know why I say that.
You can watch every game. I've watched every Rockets game. I'm not from Houston. But...
Yeah, that actually makes it easier. If you're out of the blackouts. Yeah, I love these guys. I think, like I said, well-rounded. I think that's my key point. Can beat you offensively. They are a upper third of the league offensively, upper third of the league defensively. Not the best offense, not the best defense, but can do both. And I think that makes them tough to beat.
When I watch this Cleveland team play, I see a play style and I see a roster that Milwaukee wants to be. Right? Yeah. They envision Dame in the Darius Garland role. They envision Middleton in the Donovan Mitchell role. I understand they're not the same player. Please don't take this from me saying that they're similar play styles, but that is the role that they kind of envision Middleton being, right? And then obviously they see Giannis as the Evan Mobley and Brook Lopez as the Jared Allen. The only problem is there's about 9 years of age gap between every single player on that roster that I just mentioned. And they have Kenny Atkinson instead of Doc Rivers, and their entire roster is healthy this year. Very quickly, because I do apologize, I have a heart out, so I might let these two guys finish the show for the evening. Gary, I'll go to you first. They are playing, I just counted it. Hold on. I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're playing 10 gentlemen on this roster at least 15 minutes a night. Now, again, they're undefeated, so it's working out very well for them right now. If you were to sit down in a room with the GM of the Cleveland Cavaliers and say, we're coming up on trade deadline, they're 22 games over 500. I don't even know what the record would be. They're well over 500. They've secured like a top 2 seed in the East, basically. Are you looking to make a move because Jared Allen has an incredibly tradable contract and they seem to have a really deep roster? If there is someone available that can up the overall talent level of this roster, do you think you make the move or do you ride it out with what you got?
I think this is a rare situation where I'm going to say don't disturb the chemistry, assuming, as you said, they're 20 games over 500 at the break or at the deadline. There's a value to it, and I don't look at this roster and say like they're young. They're not young in the same way that like Oklahoma City was young 2 years ago, right? Like everybody's a fucking rookie because they have 100 draft picks every year. Yeah. So I think I'm going to hold fast because I think Jared Allen brings a value to this team that I don't think you want to lose that, right? And you mentioned how tradable his contract is. If it were an opportunity to move 1 or 2 of the role players to get like an expiring contract for somebody who can make an impact, I think I'm looking, there maybe as Ryan mentioned, Niang or like a Ty Jerome or something along those. If I can move 1 or 2 of those level players for an obvious upgrade, maybe I do. I don't want to disturb, especially the chemistry of like the top 7 guys in the rotation. I don't want to disturb that too much.
Sure, certainly. I think I agree with you. I would like to see them. And also 20 games over 500 at the deadline it was a little bit hyperbolic. They'd be having one of the greatest seasons ever in NBA history. But maybe like 11 games over 500. But yes, to your sentiment, I do tend to agree. I think the team is poised to make a deep run. And as long as everyone's healthy, I would not make a move. Ryan, what says you to the front office of the Cleveland Cavaliers behind closed doors in that situation?
Yeah, I wouldn't touch it as long as Mobley continues to play well, right? I think that's the big question is Mobley and Allen make a lot of sense. Every year people are like, trade one. It's usually Allen that people talk about trading. Play Mobley at the 5, right? I don't think Mobley is currently physically ready to play the 5 full-time. So I think that they still work really well. Obviously, you need Mobley to be able to shoot the ball a little bit. And if he can continue to do that, especially on the offensive end, that's his key there because they're not worried about him defensively. I think you keep it. I think this team looks really good. I think analytically they look really good. I think you feel like you have a very good chance in the East with this current roster. You probably don't want to run into Boston, obviously, but they can give Boston a run for their money. I think they're better than everybody else in the East currently, and Boston could obviously slip a series, and then they're by far the favorite in my opinion. So I think you feel pretty good being a top 5 or 6 team in the league and being in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, for sure.
If this is the West, you might be like, we need to really do something. But even then, I wouldn't. But if you're in the West, you might consider that. But I think at the East, you feel pretty good where you are.
Definitely. Well, we've gone 70 minutes, and there's a team that I have not even said a single word about. Not one player, no injury news, nothing. And it's just burning a hole in my heart because it saddens me to have to mention this. That, of course, would be the Orlando Magic, who are no longer being led by their True Blue superstar, Paolo Banchero. It coming off of a 50-point double-double, 1 assist shy of a triple-double win on the road in Indiana over the Pacers, it truly is gut-wrenching that he got injured in, I believe it was a torn pec or a strained pec, something like that. One of his chest muscles was injured, and he's being evaluated in 4 to 6 weeks, which if we use NBA talk, that's 2 months, right? So we'll see him at Christmas potentially. This is a man who is 21 years old, just turned 21. He was the driving force of the offense down there in Orlando. They were a team that was looking like, again, very early in the year, but they were looking like they were headed towards the top 3 seed in the East. Jalen Suggs has really come along. He's scoring 18 points a game tonight and might be the best perimeter defender in the league, at least at the guard spot. I mean, it really is gut wrenching to see something like that happen. They were ready to have what I felt was going to be a magical season, if you will, in Orlando. But yeah, shout out to Paolo Banchero. There is an episode, if you go back in our archives and find it, when we were talking about the playoffs last year, and Anthony Edwards was leading the Dallas Mavericks to the Western Conference Finals, and people were comparing him to Michael Jordan, saying he's the second coming, he's going to be the best American-born player in the NBA. And I told people, I looked directly at my camera, and I said, you guys keep this same energy when Paolo Banchero is leading the Orlando Magic to the Eastern Conference Finals next year. And for almost 2.5 weeks, it almost was the case. That was something that was happening. And it's just unfortunate to see that he's going to miss, the better part of 2 months this early in the season.
Yeah, they were 3-1 with him. They are 0-5 without him. That's yeah. And obviously, if you lose your best player, right? But that's a pretty stark impact. And it's not like, they didn't beat anybody worthwhile. They beat, Indiana. They beat Miami prior to that, and they've lost to teams like Chicago, and they lost to an Indiana team they had already beaten with him. So
yeah,
it's tough. It's tough. He was. You mentioned the 50-point double-double. That was almost a triple-double. That's a big time game. Yeah, it's tough. If they can just find a way to not be in the fucking bottom of the lottery, good lottery odds by Christmas Day, you can hopefully rebound with him and chase your way to a 6 or a 7, maybe even the play-in if it's worst case. And then you're a dangerous team, right? Who wants to play that Orlando Magic team if they're a play-in team? So, yeah, it's unfortunate, man. It's brutal because it did look like he was really making that next step. We talked about it last year. He had improved with the jump shot. He was looking like he was a willing defender this year as well, early in the season, and continuing to grow, budding into a potential superstar. And we're going to be without him for a couple of months.
One last thing for me, and then I will sign off and let the boys close out the show. They can take it whatever direction they want. Gary, you and I did a pod last night, and we had sort of a serious moment in the show when we talked about like our pets. Ben Herbstreit. For those of y'all who do not know, Gary and I do a college football show on Wednesday nights. Ben Herbstreit had become somewhat of a superstar on the national level, right? He's a golden retriever that belongs to Kirk Herbstreit. I'm sure everyone knows who Kirk Herbstreit is. He calls games for ESPN, college football games. Ben Herbstreit passed away today. It's terrible news. Cancer comes for the best of us, comes for the worst of us. Obviously, it mostly affects human lives, but it also affects animal lives as well. We did kind of a shout out last night, but I want to give another one. Quick shout out to Ben Herbstreit. Everybody, if you have animals, please love on them. Show them a little bit of affection tonight in honor of Ben. I myself, as a golden retriever owner, I'll be honest, it hurt a little bit seeing that Ben passed away. It was tough for me to read that, truthfully. We come on these shows and we talk about sports, and it's all in great fun, and we have an absolute blast, and we laugh a lot, and we argue with each other, but none of it is very serious, right? We all are great friends at the end of the day, and we get off here and we talk to each other constantly. But to lose a life of somebody or something, right, in this instance that is so impactful, never forget that they love you more than you love them. So I hate to go out on a bad note like that, but we're in the middle of one of the most exciting times of the year. Obviously, we have all of the sports going on. So I'm going to sign off from here. I'm getting handed over to Gary. I'll let y'all finish the NBA show. I've had an absolute blast. Thank you all for putting up with me this evening. I am out of here. I'll be back. Same bat time, same bat channel next week.
Hey, bud. Take care.
See ya.
Yeah.
So, what do you want to talk about, Ryan? We got a couple of things we talked about on the agenda earlier.
I was just going to talk mess about Bentley, but I guess if you want to be serious.
So tell me about this man named Bentley.
Yeah, he's the worst. Can't stand that guy.
So we had an interesting game last night. The Denver Nuggets, who have been in the limelight for the last few years, obviously winning a title. Jokic has won some MVPs. Russell Westbrook gets a start last night because another topic we're going to talk about here in a moment. The injury bug has kind of run through Denver. So Russ gets significant minutes, but Jokic has a monster triple-double last night, and it's still barely enough. So I want to reiterate a little bit of what we talked about with the season opening. I was a little more bullish on the Nuggets this year still than you and Bentley, because Bentley asked the question, like, who's their number 3 scorer or who's their number 2 scorer, that sort of thing. What do you see as the ceiling? Because right now they sit, I believe, 7 in the West, at 5-3. The West is just ridiculous right now, right? Like the East, third place is 4-4, right? The third seed right now is 4-4 in the East. A team we thought made the right moves and should have hit the ground running this season is not in the Knicks. So it's really Boston and Cleveland that kind of separated themselves. The injury to Paolo changes the East a bit. But the West is jam-packed, and we expect it to stay that way. That's what we talked about to start the season. Is Denver going to be one of those teams that's hanging around the play-in? And are we going to see Denver and the Lakers kind of jostling for seeding in the 6, 7, 8 spot this year? Or do you think as the season goes, they're going to get healthier and it's going to be fine?
Yeah, I think that's tough, right? Because 2 games could be the difference between like play in and the 4 seed very easily. I think it was like 3 games between the 4 seed and the play in last time, if I remember, 2 or 3. So just a small decrease in like quality could put you in that spot. So it wouldn't shock me. I think the real concern to me is Jamal Murray healthy. He does not look healthy. There's a lot of, especially defensively, he looks slow. It's kind of like weird things I think about, like his blocks are lower. I believe his steals are lower. Like that just shows a lack of comfortability at the guard position because are athletic plays usually, like especially get a block at his size, like that's an athletic play. So I don't think he feels super comfortable. And if that is all year, they very easily could end up that way. The good thing is they have the best player in the league.
Yeah.
And they've started to discover some positive things, right? Christian Brown's looked really good, I think, contributing. I think Julian Strawther is doing what they want him to do. They need like one or two more guys. Russ might be okay. I think Russ is going to be inconsistently okay. Like he'll have games where he's really valuable, and then he'll like shoot himself out of the rotation in a game. Like that's just where he is at this point in his career. But like they just need guys, right? Like they need bodies. You cannot. They're playing a lot of guys, a lot of minutes right now. Murray is going to get beat up because of that. Michael Porter Jr. also not a guy who's known for being healthy all the time. So it's tough. I still feel pretty good about him. Again, having the best player in the world. I think I took the under on their over and under, if I remember, but that was just like the West is so good, and I expect a slight decline, which I think we're seeing, right? I think they are kind of what a lot of people thought they were, to quote a great philosopher. If you need like some of the things they thought were going to happen, like they thought Zeke Naji was going to be a contributor. He is not a contributor. They paid him money as if he was. They guessed wrong on that one. That was a bad assessment. It's just, what are you going to do? Like, is Peyton Watson going to give you something? Like, they just need somebody else. You need like one or two other guys to give them 15 minutes. And if they can get that, I feel like they can beat anybody with the best player in the world. Like I said, he individually is having one of the best starts to a season ever.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely dominated. What are his stats? It is, I got him right.
29.
13 and 11. Yeah.
11,
It's insane. He's shooting 51% from three, 53% from the floor. I mean, just that obviously will go down a little bit from the 3-point shooting, but you get that, you always have a chance every night. So I feel like they're probably not a play-in team, but again, you lose one or two close games, the Kings pass you, right? And then you're in the play-in playing the Clippers or something, or the Pelicans. And like, that's not a great matchup. Like, you don't want to play either of those teams probably. Like a healthy Clippers team or a healthy Pelicans team is probably scary.
Not in a one and done game either.
Like maybe they get lucky and they play like the Rockets or something. They probably dominate the Rockets, but you don't want to be down there. But the West is so tough. Like, it's so hard to predict. I feel like they're playing better already, but they need Murray to like be healthy, and he has just not looked healthy for like a year and a half. Really, like it's been a while.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean they only go like, if you include Julian Strawther, who's very much just a role player for that team, they go 7 deep. You mentioned a lot of guys are playing a lot of minutes. Jokic is playing almost 40. Michael Porter Jr. is playing almost 40. I think they're at like 39 and 37 respectively. And then even like Aaron Gordon's playing like 34 minutes when he plays, and Jamal Murray playing probably like 10 minutes more than he should be right now with the way he looks like he is on the floor too. So yeah, and you're going to start to stretch that thin as you go farther into the season. Like, it's tough. It's tough because, Jamal Murray playing 35 minutes a night, like that feels like a ton. Aaron Gordon's playing 30 when he plays. But I think the development of Christian Brown, who's averaging 16 points a night, is a very pleasant surprise. But like you said, they need one more. Is it Julian Strawther who can step his game up and average 12 points a night instead of 9? Is that it? Is Zeke Naji going to figure this fucking thing out before the season's too late? It doesn't look good right now. Maybe they're buyers at the deadline, and it's moving a couple of beneficial contracts, right? Who knows, what they can do to maybe bring in another guy. But right now, like we've mentioned already, the West is just so tough. Like I said, like third place in the East, Indiana and Brooklyn are both 4-4. 4-4 in the West has you in the lottery before the play-in. So the Clippers, who are 4-4 right now, are on the outside looking in from the play-in. So it's tough. It's tough out there in the West. So gonna be difficult for them. I want to talk about the last thing that we really talked about on the agenda mainly is the injury bug that's really hit some big time superstars, but it's also like kind of impacting. We talked about Milwaukee earlier with Middleton not being back, and Dame looks old, and they just don't. I don't know that they're going to be able to figure that out. But Paolo Banchero with his injuries and Jamal Murray and just the impact that it's having with teams across the league. How do we combat that? Is it mostly roster construction? Are we starting to see like the impact of this era in which teams are pushing, like you said it so eloquently earlier, like you're either chasing draft capital or you're chasing superstars, and we've seen a couple of teams where you fall off that cliff with these superstars. Is this the product of that, or is it just maybe we're in like a bad luck stretch to start the 2024-2025 NBA season?
Probably both to some extent, right? Like injuries are huge variabilities. They always are. Like in every sport, basketball's weird. Like guys just tear their Achilles walking down the floor sometimes. It's just weird. Same in football, right? Like non-contact stuff happens all the time. I think with the new CBA, with the punishing nature of the aprons, we will actually see deeper teams. Like a lot of teams will want to be deeper with like more middling contracts. I think so that might in the future kind of go away where there's a lot more depth. The good thing is the league is really talented right now. Obviously losing a superstar you can't replace, but there's guys on teams that are good that aren't playing. That could play on an actual team. Like we need to add like one or two teams. But yeah, I think it is a little bit of the remnants of the pre-new CBA where it's like everyone was like assembling as much high-end talent as possible, not knowing that was the aprons were going to exist in the future. And they said, this is how you win a championship, which history has shown that that's typically how you win a championship. Daryl Morey talks about that all the time. And I think it's remnants of the effects of that, right? You get one injury and it's over. Kawhi gets hurt. It's that the Clippers are gone. Like Paul George, Harden, and Leonard, that dream is over. And that was like, how many championships are they going to win? I remember people saying that. Same in Brooklyn. There were no injuries in Brooklyn. It was just weird stuff happened. Like you create really high ceilings and really low floors when you consolidate around superstars, whereas when you consolidate around draft picks, you create really high floors and really high ceilings. Sometimes you end up in the floor and it doesn't really help you much, but you have so much you can do a lot of different things with. Yeah. But it is just the factor of consolidating around three guys or two guys, paying them $50+ million a year. And then the rest of the contracts make 50 total. So it's two guys are making 2/3 of the entire cap.
Yeah.
And it causes problems. If you lose that guy, it's over. Like you just can't replace them financially.
Yeah, for sure. One other thing I want to ask your opinion. This is a very 100% opinionated question. What can the league do with Joel Embiid? Like, what's his problem?
What problem are we talking about?
he doesn't want to play, and he's also an asshole. Like, you've got a former MVP shoving a member of the media, like,
yeah,
not playing, and you suspend him. So, like, you're telling him, like, you can just not play more.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sympathetic to Embiid, to be honest, in a lot of ways. I think maybe that's a hot take, at least in the internet space. Yeah, in the internet space, I think he gets a lot of flack. Like, why don't you play? I understand that part of it. I think the shoving, obviously he should not have shoved the guy, but the guy talked about his dead brother. Like, I read the book about the process, and that is like a huge part of the like history of the process is when his brother died. And it was like he said he was going to quit playing because of it. Like he was so distraught. It was a very young brother. I think he was like 9 or 11 or something like that when he was killed. he already is upset because of probably the surrounding factors, and then that was brought into it. So I give him I don't think violence is good, but I give him a little bit of a pass for like how that was. The NBA has said that he is hurt, but the 76ers are lying about
him, though.
They find the 76ers
or they find the
because
team, but like
they said he is hurt and can't play, but the 76ers did not correctly say, because what they were doing was they were not saying he was injured. They were saying it was for management, but he is injured according to the doctor. So they were like, you have to say he's injured. If he's injured, you can't say it's for management. If it's for management, that's a different thing, right?
Yeah.
So like, there's so much going on with like the team and him and his injury history. Like, I don't know. I just feel like he's the easy scapegoat. He's so talented. Like, that team is supposed to be good, but Paul George is hurt. He's hurt. Maxey's hurt now. Like, again, you get that team into the playoffs, they're probably fine. Like, it's the East. They very well could still get in. It's early. I just think Joel Embiid gets a bad rep. I do think he is often an asshole, to be fair. But I don't think he's a bad guy. I think he just he's inordinately unhealthy and still like fights through it, right? Like, he comes back every time.
Yeah.
Lots of guys don't. Lots of guys don't come back. Some of those injuries are career-ending for some guys, and he has come back every time. So I give him credit for that. But I understand people being upset. Yeah, maybe, like I said, maybe it's a hot take, but I would give him a pass. I would love to see him on the floor. He's one of my favorite players to watch, just what he can do on the floor. Yeah, and they need him back. They need him and Paul George back, because without Maxey, that team is going to be really, really bad. They're already bad, but they're going to be really, really bad.
Yeah, and that's not an easy one for Maxey to come back from, that hamstring, and that nagging one too.
Yeah, lingers every time.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so I want to open up here. I know we talked about the agenda being kind of strange starts. Is there a strange start that we haven't talked about yet? I know we've hit about a handful of teams, but is there a strange start we haven't talked about yet that you wanted to highlight?
I don't think there are like a lot of super strange starts because it's so early. I would say we hit the Bucks. That's like probably the most unusual one, because I think the Pelicans is also one, but they've had a lot of injuries. Trey Murphy's been hurt. I think that's like a big miss for them. They also like have no bigs, which is tough on them. I think the Grizzlies have started off pretty well. I think the Grizzlies look decent. That's a team we were all kind of skeptical of, but they have talent on the roster. It's just, is it going to play?
Yep.
And they look like to play. Atlanta's looked better than people thought. I thought Atlanta was like a 500 team. They're like in the ballpark. Yeah, in the East, like, that's good.
I know.
That's a competitive team.
Yeah, they're the 5 seed right now, under 500. They're 4 and 5, yeah. And they're the 5 seed.
Yeah, they have a better win-loss than the Knicks do right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Knicks obviously figuring it out as well. I think that's going to take them a little bit. I think Detroit is a team I thought that would look better than they do. I don't think they actually look terrible. I think they look better than their record, which are 3-6 right now. I think that's a team with the injuries could end up in the play-in. That's. I think they hope
the East is going to be. That's not a stretch. Like,
yeah,
they could be a 32-win team and be the 10 seed.
Yep. Yeah, I think the other team people are talking about is obviously the Lakers and the Redick effect, like kind of the play style they're going with, they're shooting the ball a lot more. They're 4-4, so we'll see, how long.
They're 3-0, I believe, right? They're 1-3 or 1-4 since.
Yeah, I believe so. They look all right. There's just a lot of there's a lot of really good teams: Boston, Cleveland, the Thunder, and then there's like a lot of everybody else. Like, there's a lot of teams in that second tier: the Mavericks, the T-Wolves, the Kings, the Knicks, the Suns, the Bucks, the Warriors, the Lakers. Right? It's like this long list. But I feel like there's 3 really good teams right now, and I think that's cool. I think the Thunder need to score the ball, but they're shutting everybody down.
Yeah.
They look like one of the best defenses of all time right now.
Under 100 a game.
Yeah.
In this
And-
era. In
yeah.
this era of basketball.
Yeah, they might be the best defense we've seen in quite a while, and they can throw like 10 defensive guys at you too, which is the crazy thing. And one is hurt, so he's just going to add another one to it. There's so much. I mean, we're really early. I just wanted to hit on like very basic stuff there that I think there's some people look better than their record and some look worse than their record. The 76ers are better than 1-6. Obviously, they just got to have their guys play. The Clippers might be my one. I think I said I would like the Clippers coming into the year. I think I said I thought James Harden and Zubats would have like a crazy good year because they're the only like offensive threat really. And Zubats is the pick and roll partner for James Harden. And Zubats has looked incredible. I think he had like a 28-15 game, and he's looked great. And Harden can't go downhill as much anymore, but he looks still like a top 25 guy.
He's nearly averaging a triple-double.
Yeah. I mean, he's incredible still to this day without being able to. Yeah. Powell's been
that
good.
Fucking career revival.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, there's guys. I mean, I don't think they're anything crazy. I think they've had a tough schedule so far, though. So they could be 5-3 pretty easily, probably 6-2. Like, that's, again, a team I wouldn't want to play. There's just so much. I think there's a lot of talent, a lot of parity in the league right now, which is really good. So that makes me happy to start the year where there's a lot more competitive teams, people playing, because people don't know. If you're in the East, you don't know if you can get in there.
Yeah.
If you're Charlotte, you're like, hey, we could probably get in there. like we might be able to. The Raptors, they might be able to, right? Like they're 2-7, but like they've been unhealthy all year with Quickly and Barrett. Do you like try to sneak in? Like, I don't know. It's going to be a fun year, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, circling back to Memphis, I know the big thing we talked about was who's going to be in the starting five. Well, I think Memphis has kind of answered that question by telling the world we don't have a starting five. We just have 7 guys we really like, and they're just going to rotate them quite a bit. Zach Edey doesn't look lost, doesn't look out of his element. I know that was the big concern. Like, he's a plotter. Is he going to be able to keep up with NBA bodies? He looks fine, averaging 10 points a game as a rookie. Not the assist numbers I thought we might see from him because he was such a good passer at Purdue, but I think that's a matter of how ball dominant Ja Morant is when he's on the floor. So that's a big thing. But you got nobody's averaging more than 30 minutes a game, which I think is good for this roster because they have some guys that have a history of injury concerns. Triple J and Ja Morant being the 2 biggest ones, but obviously Bane got hurt last year, so we want to make sure he stays healthy because he's very important to what they do both offensively and defensively. But I think Memphis is overachieving right now, and I at least overachieving from what I thought they would be this year. And I think they've kind of figured out what the rotation is, and that was my biggest question mark for them. The Spurs, I'm a little bit in terms of the fact that they are 3-5. I don't know what to make of it because I was very bullish on them. I thought that they could end up being a playoff team potentially in the West if things clicked. I know right now they're dealing with the Pop stuff and get well Pop. He's dealing with that health scare. It was kind of a sudden health scare. You never like hearing that word used in conjunction with a health scare. First thing that comes to mind, you're talking like heart or, something brain or something along those lines. You don't want that sort of thing. So sending best wishes for him, get healthy. But their schedule lightens up in looking at what they've played so far. It's been a pretty tough schedule. They've played Houston 3 times. They've played the Clippers. They played Minnesota, OKC, Dallas. Yep. They had their one kind of ease up game against Utah. But they've got Portland, Utah, and Washington in 3 of their next 4. So they could start to create some momentum here. We will see, right, with a team like San Antonio. When you're as young as they are, when you're in clear, like our horizon is 2 years from now, it's hard to say they might create momentum and seize that momentum and keep it going. It can be very fleeting with a young team versus a veteran team. So.
Yeah, I think according to Dunks and Threes, San Antonio has played the toughest aggregate defense so far the whole year. Unless you aggregate all the defenses they've played the number 1 most difficult defensive teams, and 14th offense. So they've had a pretty tough schedule if you combine those two. Offensively,
So the metrics
it's a
align
concern.
with what the schedule looks like.
Yeah, yeah. Offenses are concerned, right? Like scoring the ball.
Yeah.
They it's a lot of like standing around. But Devin Vassell's not playing. If Devin Vassell's there, like you probably look a lot better. Like you stretch the floor a lot better. So I think they're okay. Like it's hard to know just with the schedule so far. I think give them another 10 games, we'll know a lot more.
Yep.
Probably of every team, but definitely of them, just because of the how their schedule was to start the season.
Yeah.
I do want to say about Memphis, they have gotten a lot of contributions from guys that I think a lot of people didn't think about. Scottie Pippen Jr.
Sure.
Has been really good. A guy who was always a fringe NBA player. He's a little small, not like his dad.
Yeah.
But has always been
an athletic like his dad. Right?
yeah, he's always been scrappy. Good defender. He's looked pretty good. Jalen Wells, a second-round pick. I was not super high on him coming into the draft, but I knew a lot of people who were. A lot of people I follow, other analysts, they were really high on him, but they thought he could contribute right away. He looks like he can. He's playing 26 minutes. He's played every single game. I think Jay Huff has been really good, a guy from Virginia, University of Virginia, that has been kind of a journeyman, but is a great defensive big. He's looked better than Zach Edey, in my opinion, as their backup big. So I wonder if that's what they converted him to a full contract instead of a two-way, which was what he was on before. So they, I think, agree that he looks really good. So Memphis, because of the injuries, they need that depth because Desmond Bane's already been hurt. John Morant is already missing games. Like you said, a lot of these guys are hurt all the time. Jaren Jackson, Brandon Clark was hurt last year.
Yep.
They need these guys to play. So I think it's good for them to have some depth there. Obviously, you can't replace John Morant and Desmond Bane just with anybody, but you can steal some games with those guys. So I think that's good for them.
Yeah, and another guy you didn't mention, I know he's been a serviceable guy in the rotation, but Santi Aldama is setting career highs in points, rebounds, and assists. That's a big deal for them as well to kind of soften some of the blow of these guys that are going to miss time. You expect them to miss time, right? You expect Triple J and Ja, especially just with their history, to miss time. And then Desmond Bane, as you mentioned, he's already been nicked up to start this year and missed quite a bit of time last year. So Aldama's given them quality minutes as well.
Yeah, a guy who's done that basically his whole career. I remember when he was drafted at the end of the first round, people were like, who is this guy? Because he was a projected, like, barely second-round pick. I remember he was a very low projected pick, and he's just been solid, like, his whole career. Just like a 6'10" guy. I mean, they have him at 7 foot. I don't think he's 7 foot, but a big guy who can do a little bit of everything.
Program.
Yeah, do a little bit. He's a skinny 7 foot 215, but does a little bit of everything. Can play the 4 and the 5. Like that's big for them. That versatility is huge. And when Jaren Jackson was hurt to begin the year, he was starting and playing a lot of minutes. Now he won't play as much now, but still, just knowing you have that consistency behind it that can play multiple positions in the front court's big for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. Any others you want to highlight?
No, I think I gave like a 2-second on half the league, so I was trying to speed run it so I don't have to cover them.
You did well. All right, bud. Well, good episode. Bentley can't be here to finish, but I caught the beginning. You guys were crushing it. And I appreciate y'all letting me jump in and be part of the show. And
I always enjoy it.
Shower us with your guys' wealth of knowledge. Dad, appreciate the comments in the chat. Bentley, thanks for giving us one on the way out. For Ryan, Bentley, and the rest of the boys here at Buckets, this has been Backyard Buckets, brought to you by Backyard Sports. We are